a Legend of the Five Rings podcast, funded by the Legend of the Five Rings Discord Patreon.
This podcast will focus on the role-playing game stories and lore for Legend of the Five Rings.
I'm Korva.
I'm Kikita Kaori, and today we are continuing our review of Rid of the Wilds. Hopefully you heard our last one, and so we'll just be talking about that. In our last episode, we kind of talked about the Wilds, the Secret Empire in Section 1, and the Dragon Clan. And in Section 2, we get to talk about the Dragonfly Clan and some of the new schools and, you know, techniques and game mechanic-y stuff.
Yeah, we start off with the Dragonfly Clan, which act as the gatekeepers to the Dragon Clan, so they're a lot closer related to a great clan than a great many minor clans are. There's a couple of interesting changes. For a long time, they kind of had some of the most fertile grounds in Dragonlands, but in this version of them, their lands actually aren't that fertile, which is interesting, a new change. And there are ghostly moon echoes around the place, which definitely is extremely new.
Yeah, this whole section kind of made my little geologist nerd have some problems with it, because considering where it is located in Dragonlands, it's going to be more fertile than anything anyway, because it's the foot of the mountain. It's getting all of that runoff and stuff. In old lore also, it was land that other clans, specifically the Lion, wanted due to its being very fertile, and there was a lot of fighting over it. And now it's like nobody would want it because their vegetables grow white. I don't know. I had a hard time with their plants all grow white.
Yeah, it's very strange.
It's very strange. I did kind of like the moon echoes, wherein when the moon hits, you see kind of shadows of the future or stuff. That was strange, but, you know, I kind of appreciate that. But I didn't like the white vegetables. I just wasn't sure about that.
The kind of claim is that the soil is the wrong sort of soil, and then maybe that can happen depending on this and that. The other thing, I do wonder if the vegetables all growing bone white is more of a supernatural thing than it is a geological thing, because it's just such an odd one. I don't know. I've never heard of. Yeah, I've never heard of anything like it.
Even their soil being like what it is, you know, doesn't make much sense. I think what they are going for, at a guess, with some of the changes into the environment itself, is that they want it to seem like it was under the influence of the realm of Mado.
Right. Yeah.
Where, you know, everything's boring and you're waiting for a very long time.
Oh, yes. Yes. Because you're
standing in line waiting to be judged by the dead. So I think they were trying to get that feeling of waiting in a boring place for a very long time at the foot of the mountains for the dragon to say, you can come out of Mado and come to us. And I think that was why they went for that vibe, I think.
I think that might be like bit on the nose if that's what they're going for. I would personally prefer the Dragonfly lands to be because the idea of people talking about it like it's staying at Mado, it's more about the waiting, not about the place you are waiting in. And I think it's actually funnier if Dragonfly lands are actually lovely and pleasant and a perfectly lovely place to stay. It's just you just don't want to be there. No one goes to the Dragonfly lands to go to the Dragonfly lands. They go to the Dragonfly lands to go to the Dragonlands. And, you know, it's I'm sure it's lovely here, but this isn't my destination. And I think that's actually funnier.
I get it.
Yeah, funny is perhaps not quite word, but I think that's a more interesting way of putting it than everything is in fact all white and colorless. And I certainly don't think that it's a very good idea to make the the place infertile and it can barely support the dragonfly and their guests, I think that immediately causes issues with given how they're meant to work. But never mind. So I think you might be right about them going for that Mado vibe, which I kind of get it, but I think that might be a bit too on the nose for my taste.
Yeah. So the origin story for the Dragonfly clan is similar to what it was before, but they've kind of expanded it, made it more complicated. It was always a love story between a dragon and a Asawa, and the Asawa was engaged to a lion and ended up marrying the dragon. And their love, then the dragon and the phoenix joined to protect their love. So they kind of expanded on this and went into more depth as to, like, the dragon was married before and that he wanted to leave and he wasn't allowed, and Togashi. It's always because of Togashi, in the end. And so on.
Yeah.
So the part that is unexplained here, which is always unexplained in the previous story too, so even with this expanded thing, is why the emperor wanted to foster closer ties between the dragon and the phoenix, to make this new Dragonfly clan. So that isn't explained here, but it's always been a point of like, okay, I get love story, run off, join. I can even get the dragon and the phoenix like protecting the lovers from the lion because, the lion can be lionish. But I don't know why the emperor would declare a minor clan over it. But hey, it works.
Looking at the map, it's kind of odd that Dragonfly lands apparently used to be Phoenix lands because they seem quite far away from the Phoenix. But hey, the maps never did make sense, so never mind. I mean, it's possible that it wasn't so much the Empire wanted. I don't know. The obvious reason would be because of petitioning and lobbying by the Phoenix and the Dragon, and possibly other people saying, "Well, the Lion want to bully their way into something, so we don't want the Lion to have it." And someone says, "Well, what do the Lion want? We don't care. The Lion wants it. They shouldn't have it because we're annoyed with the Lion today." Maybe that's how it came about, but who knows? The other new thing they've added is a focus on glass, which I think might be, again, being slightly on the nose because of dragonfly wings, which are all shiny and pretty and iridescent. And so it looks like it's kind of feeling that like they're going for a feel of the Mado with the lack of color, but the dragonfly wings have to be shiny and iridescent, and that brings us into glass.
Right. So traditionally, the dragonfly mon was rainbow colored.
Yes.
And so they're kind of keeping that by saying, glass making the rainbows in this all white space. Of course, they say this place is filled with mist. Glass doesn't make rainbows when it's misty. It's sunny. Anyway, it's very strange.
Yeah, I kind of got a bit, grumpy history nerd about the glass as well, because it's a whole new thing, which apparently no one else does, but they do. This, I do have a kind of a reflex, knee-jerk reaction to, we are going to introduce this thing from the West that wasn't historically in that area. And then everyone will be amazed by this thing because it's, that kind of rankles me a little bit sometimes. And this kind of feels a little bit like that. Mm-hmm. And I kind of found the whole glass sword thing, which is the other new thing, is that they make a katana out of glass, which is supposed to represent, you don't use this sword because this sword can only be used once. Right, you will hit with it and it will be as deadly as a katana, but it will only last once. Therefore, pacifism, except for the utmost need. As a symbol, maybe, but they seem to actually make them, and they've got stats, and I'm like, oh dear God, no. I mean, I don't. I mean, I you know, it just doesn't seem to. I can't make it fit in my brain, which might be a me problem. Could well be.
It's an interesting philosophy, you know, pacifism, except that the other of us need. We've got pacifism in a lot of other places with other clans without the glass sword philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, apparently the Dragonfly did do this before. I thought this was new, but apparently not.
Oh, I can believe that. They gave it more depth. And, you know, having things that make your clan unique is great. It is not practical to go adventuring with your glass sword.
No.
That's just silly. It can be on a stand.
Yeah, it could be on a stand, that kind of thing. Could be an ornamental thing. Could be a purely philosophical thing, which I would mind a lot less.
Yeah, I took it as mostly philosophical with a dose of, hi, we can create a symbol of our philosophy out of our thing that we do, which is making glass.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like people don't lug around other symbols of their philosophy.
Yeah, I suppose.
You know, you can have it, but as an adventurer, I wouldn't be lugging around my glass sword.
No, I think that would be a mistake.
It's all fine. I don't mind the glass stuff. If you have the Dragonfly being this iteration of the Dragonfly, and they have no, you know, bad food or whatever there, and they can't support themselves like that, glass is going to be freaking everywhere in the Empire.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing.
Because they're going to export it.
They're going to export it.
Keep it to themselves. That's how they're going to have all the good food and everything else that everyone else has. They're going to export all their glass.
Which pretty much isn't, yeah.
So now, that said, in Japanese architecture, it's not practical.
No, because your buildings fall down because of the earthquakes.
Exactly. Even very minor tremors. And we're talking in Japan, you know, of many very minor earthquakes a year, glass will crack. They don't know how to do the rubber sealed, resilient window frames. Like we have now, we can handle a truck going by with a thin pane of glass because it's in a little buffered frame.
And it's tempered and it's made properly and yada, yada. I mean, all these sorts of things.
Right.
Yeah.
But glass for windows or anything like that is, even if you had glass ornaments everywhere in the Empire, is just not practical. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. It's just too many earthquakes. But you would find glass beads and decorations and hair ornaments and all that stuff all over the place. Because it's cheaper than jewels. Cheaper and easy to get than jewels, even if it's getting from the Dragonfly lands.
I mean, interestingly, Japan never seemed to really go for gemstones as a thing, which I found quite fascinating. They never did rings, they never did amulets, they never did necklaces, earrings, that kind of thing. They had some kind of sparkly bling in the hair ornaments for ladies. But interestingly, they just never went that way, which is another of the people, you know, things we assume. Like we assume gemstones. Yes, everyone's going to have gems everywhere. And not everyone does, which is a cool, interesting thing.
No. It's they're hard to find. If you're an island nation, it's kind of actually hard to find gems, you know?
They didn't bother importing them in large numbers from foreign places, which you thought they might do. But yeah, interesting. This is another FFG minor clan who doesn't do arranged marriages.
Love only.
Love only. Yet another one.
Now, and this is from old times. So
this is true.
Unlike, say, the deer, which didn't really. Anyway,
we won't start that again. Please see all our other podcasts for rants about the deer. but yeah,
yes,
yet another one.
Dragonfly has always in old lore been the one. So all the other ones are new. This is the original,
the OG, which I think is reasonable
because it's reasonable to have one. It's reasonable to have one.
Yeah,
So this was the original. So I give the Dragonfly a pass
absolutely.
on that. Even if the Empire in general is not geared this way.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the Dragonfly clan. As mechanically, it does Earth Sentiment for the clan, and then air or water and courtesy and culture for the family. So pretty much courtiers, courtier build.
I mean, I like the details on what waiting in the Dragonfly lands is like. I like the short story because that really kind of brings out some of the aspects which you might not think about. Because that really is the Dragonfly thing, is that you try to go to the Dragonlands and you can't, and they stop you, and then suddenly they're saying, no, it's fine, you go through, and it's all very confusing. And that's part of, and they often don't know why either. So I always like that about the Dragonfly clan, and I think with those quibbles that we've had, I do actually quite like the Dragonfly write-up.
I would have liked a little bit more. The one thing that I felt was missing is a little bit about the leadership of the clan and like how it's actually run. Like, how do they know when to send somebody up, or because you're going to be lobbying. If you're in Dragonfly lands and being stuck in Dragonfly lands for the Dragonfly thing, which is you want to go up in the mountains, right? You're going to be lobbying, which means you're going to be interacting with the leadership or trying to figure out how you can. And so I kind of would have liked some depth there, but that's okay. That's okay. It was interesting.
Yeah. So once we've talked about the Dragonfly clan, we're now looking at the next section, which is...
There's another set of 20 questions. This is a thing that we've had with all the FFG books. FFG/Edge now presumes that when you get a splat book, you are only going to have the splat book and the core book and nothing else to work with to run the game.
They have to write it as if that is the case, because for some people that will be true. That does, however, lead to stuff being reprinted, which is what's happening here.
Right. And so not the entire 20 questions, but a significant chunk of the 20 questions from Path of Waves is reprinted. It's a subset of regions, just the wilderness regions, rather than all the regions. But it's all printed here. So then for all of these new non-Rokugani schools that they are having, all these Yabanjan schools and so on. I wish they didn't do this. I understand why they do, but I don't think they necessarily need to write up the whole section with all the information in it and descriptions and flavor text. I think they could do it in a couple paragraphs and say, if you want to see the full descriptions, go to not even a couple paragraphs, a couple sentences. So, have the 20 questions, but have no filler text on it. Just have, have the specific questions listed, and then for details about this, please see Path of Waves if you want to know more.
And it's like 8.5 pages, and I can see why some people would be saying, "Why?" Like, if you don't have Path of Waves, this is fantastic because this is the first alternate 20 questions you found. But if you do have Path of Waves, it's like, do we really need 8.5 pages taken up with this? So,
and a lot of it is the regions and upbringings, and they aren't the complete list of regions and upbringings from Path of Waves, but some of those regions and upbringings I thought they should have had here. For example, the one that I noticed was the haunted. You came from a haunted region.
Yes.
That should be here. I mean, that should be here too. Not that I want more space
and
for it.
I think there's also probably several of the 20 questions that don't actually change in between. So maybe they could have saved some space by just, okay.
Well, they didn't have all of them. It's just the first handful of them.
That's true.
Have handful of them and 6. They didn't replace all of them. So the ones that were the same, they didn't.
That's true. That's pretty good. So, having griped about that, right, so we're going to talk about the schools themselves, at least very briefly.
So you got to take this with a large dose of salt, because I have not actually played these schools because, I just evaluating the book. All right. So the first of these schools is the Dragonfly school, Shugenja school, called Grace of the Spirits. It is a Shugenja courtier school. It has invocations, rituals, and shuji. It is they're using a mechanic that is very strange to me, because for the school ability, if you fail a social roll, you can roll a TN4 theology check.
Well, TN5.
It's TN5 -1 for rank 1.
The actual maximum is 4 that you actually roll.
And it's technical, but anyway, to turn some of those kept ring dice to successes.
Yeah.
Okay? At level 1, hitting a TN4 on what you're probably rolling as a Shugenja as a 5 keep 3 is a real challenge.
Yeah.
But it turns all your rings to successes if you want. But they're just successes, not explosive successes. So it will turn, if you can hit that TN4 theology check, you could probably be having 3 regular successes, and then you can hit some higher numbers. That makes sense. Once you start getting to level 2, though, now you're hitting a TN3 on what will probably be a 6 keep 3 roll. It doesn't specify what ring you use. You can use your best one.
It's probably the ring you were using for the original social check, but they should specify.
And that's where this school gets funky, is because Shugenja are incentivized strongly by the way Shugenja rules work to just level theology.
Yeah, and the ring that their best invocations are in.
Right. Everybody else, like especially courtiers, have to spread out their rings a lot.
Yeah.
And they have to, get lots of different social skills. I need courtesy to do with people above me, and I need command to be people lowly, and I need my games, and that's just being a courtier. So here, the Dragonfly can focus on their single skill that they're focusing on anyway, because they're Shugenja, and just roar through the levels.
Yeah.
Very fast. And hitting a TN3 on 6 keep 3 is pretty easy. And then after that, you're talking about hitting a TN2.
Yes. At rank 3, yeah.
1. I rank 3 on something that will probably be more like 7 keep 4.
Something like that. It's also the case that they are clearly meant to be specializing in air and water, which are, admittedly, you can use any of the rings to do a social thing in, but I rather suspect air and water are the ones you do most of your social checks in. And if we start saying that the theology check is in the same ring that you did your social check in, which I think would be the most logical thing, well, that's going to be probably a good ring for you anyway, because you're incentivized to get air and water invocations in your curriculum. You're incentivized to get air and water shuji in your first rank, and you get air and water +1 for the school. Well, clearly, you're likely to be having a good ring for your theology check. And it's once per scene. You probably auto succeed
until level 6, and then it auto succeeds at every roll, every social roll. But all that said, it's not as bad as you might think, in that opportunities are very important in social scenes.
They very are, yeah.
And explosive successes are a thing. But this is going to be an extremely low strife character, because you're not going to have to be picking any strife for those successes. They're just plain successes.
Yep.
just things to think about. I do not think it's broken. I think it's funky because of how low the social roles go at higher levels. But it is important to remember these are not opportunities. That's how many of the shuji work is required for opportunities, not successes. And fire stance and its strife with bonus successes and stuff, that doesn't work. There's no strife on these either. So things to think about. Okay. The only quibble I had with it, other quibble, is just that it has martial arts melee. Martial arts unarmed instead of martial arts melee in there because pacifism and glass swords and all that.
Yeah, especially when it's like there's not even the Shugenja or Bushi school. So martial arts unarmed does seem to make a lot more sense than martial arts melee to me. So I would agree with you on that. The next school we'll be looking at is the Laughing Mountain Hearthstone tradition. So the Laughing Mountain people are the people who live in the mountains of the spine of the world.
These are the Yobanjin.
Yeah, the Yobanjin people who semi-nomadic people who live in the spine of the world mountains. They're called this because travelers, Rokugani travelers, sometimes, I heard this strange laughing in the mountains. It was very weird. And it turns out to be these folk. And so this is a courtier/monk school. And these are, they have a revered tradition of that, of the Hearthstone. They specifically trade in the art of creating the perfect atmosphere for every occasion. So these are people who are dedicated hosts, entertainers, listeners, and mediators between the peoples. Once you make a successful social check against another character in the scene, they get a reduced target number for subsequent social checks. So the better you do to start off with, the easier things go after that. So you kind of made a good impression, and now everyone likes you. You can't stack it to get additional bonuses against one person, but you can, go for different people.
It's one of the only ones that it may be the first one that has a school that doesn't scale with rank.
That's a good point, actually.
It uses a mechanic that is kind of like what I would do if I were a GM. Maybe house ruling or otherwise. And I think there might be a shuji associated with this for gift giving. So if you give a really good gift and they really like it, then their social skills checks with them decrease by 1. So it feels like that. It's pretty straightforward.
Oh, they get a woolly pony as starting outfit.
They get a woolly pony. I like that.
Yeah.
The high end ability, the level 6 ability, means they can train their social skills to 6. So that makes it feel like a Ronin school, having this ability to take your skills up to 6. So I kind of like that. It works for the whole outsider vibe that they go in. If I would lean towards anything with this, I would say this would be a good one for fire courtier style because of the shuji that it has in there, and also because how these school abilities work with fire stance, because, if your target numbers are lower, you can keep lots of strife and lots of, get lots more bonus successes, and that tends to play well with the fire stance.
They're kata rituals and shuji by default, but they do get a fair number of kiho in their curriculum.
The next one is the Shinomen Naga school. So this is a non-human school. The Shinomen Naga are a courtier bushi school. They have kata, ritual, and shuji, which is a very kind of standard set for samurai. It has the disguise yourself with an illusion as a school ability. So you can look like you're a cart with a horse, or you can look like you're, two people walking together, or whatever it is to make you hide yourself and look like a person, people, whatever. Also increases your tail damage by your school rank. So you can whack someone with the tail that no one saw you having.
I just noticed that in the art for this, which is a very pretty piece of artwork of a Naga individual wearing armor, they've got a snake around their neck like a scarf, which for some odd reason strikes me as odd for the Naga to be wearing a snake.
It's a little brother.
Something like that, yes.
High level ability has additional armor from its snake scale, but in addition, I think the interesting thing is that it has Naga armor as part of the equipment issued for this school. And the Naga armor is good, strong armor. But I always wonder, is that like actually equipped armor that becomes damaged?
Yes. Or is that their skin? Yeah.
Gets a critical hit on it and you take it and you mend it, or what? Or what happens when it breaks? Like, is that part of your body as Naga armor, or is that?
That's an interesting question. And can you wear armor on top of that? Because the artwork, the artwork clearly has someone wearing samurai armor on top of on the human-y bit.
I don't know. We won't talk about too much about the specific things they can do, but they can do snake stuff as kata. So
the next school is another non-human school. This is the Nezumi Tattered Ear Explorer tradition, who are a Bushi school. Kata and Shuji for them. That's all they get to start off with. Although they do get another couple of techniques in there, mostly ninjutsu, because they are sneaky little mouse people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Earth and Fire. They're pretty cool. Their school ability is when they make a check to perceive or investigate surroundings, they get their school rank off the target number of that check, which is kind of a cool one. I wonder how well that scales, because how often do you ask for a target number 5 perceive your environment check? So that means they're going to be very good at that. But
so there's some interesting things. This is not criticism of the school. I like the school actually, because I think it would be very interesting to play this school, and especially with the Nezumi only kata that are available in the list of techniques. But some interesting things to keep an eye out for. Investigation can happen in any skill.
Yes.
According to how investigation is done in 5e. For example, history,
Yes.
or some of the scholarly skills are used for investigation. Culture, all of these are used for investigation. The Nezumi, when they're using any of these skills, get the TN off. So you could end up having that level 5 research scholarly task, or that level 5 archive government investigation, for example. Let's say. So if you've got a task that's buried deep in the bowels of the government repository that you want your scholarly government person to do it, yeah, they get their level off of the TN for doing that. If you have your Nezumi research assistant researching that for
this scroll just smelled right. What can I tell you?
Exactly, and that's what. And I mean that could be. I followed the scent to the right scroll, or it's up to your player to figure out how to make that work. But it'll happen.
You said it was about the history of the metalworking in this region. I just went for the scroll that smelt most of iron. What else?
Exactly.
Why are you surprised by this? Everyone else is like, that makes no sense.
It is an alternate way of thinking about research.
Yes.
But, that you get to be creative to think how they're doing that. But it can be done, and it is fair for it to be done. It's just being done in a different way.
Yeah.
So that's why it would be reduce the TN that way. They're not necessarily researching all those government scrolls the way your courtier would. They are finding it in some other fashion.
Yep. Their high level ability, if you ever get to rank 6, is an interesting one. You spend a void point. If someone within range 1 to 2 of you is attempting to move away from you, spend a void point and immediately make 2 strike actions, which I think could be quite vicious in a fight. But, if you're fighting rank 6 anybody, you're in a world of hurt so regardless. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So as a rank 6, that sounds quite powerful, but then it's rank 6. So rank 6 should be quite vicious. Mm-hmm. So they look like they could be fun.
So the next ability, or the next school, I should say, is the Tengu Mask of Air School. And this is a monk sage school. This is kind of interesting. It has invocations, kiho, and rituals, but no kata. It does have lots of kihos, so they're strong for fighting, but no kata.
Well, they get some in the curriculum, but they can't choose any old kata, yeah.
But not very many, very few.
Very specific ones.
Very specific ones. Their school can replicate a technique. So if they do a TN6 meditation, which is impossible at low levels, you're not going to be able to make a TN6 meditation check at low levels.
Well, again, it's reduced by the school rank.
-1 a rank.
So yeah,
-1. So
it starts at 5. Yeah,
it starts at 5. Those are really hard numbers to reach.
Oh yes.
Your school can replicate a technique someone else is doing that you're fighting, or you're facing. They have to be there, as I understand it. You can't just pull something out of the book and say this. You have to. It's replicating. It's duplicating it.
Of a category and rank you have available to you. So so you might. Does that count? Does that mean kata are not available to you? So you can't study kata?
I think this would be a very hard one to use. In order to replicate the technique, you need to do this high-level meditation check. It is an open question whether you keep the technique after you have replicated for the rest of time or not.
If you succeed, you can replicate that technique until the end of the scene. So the school ability implies no, you can only get it to the end of the scene.
Okay. So, but here's the thing. The only things you can replicate are what you have in school. Invocations, kiho, and rituals. Many of the times, the things you're copying the most are going to be kata. You can't replicate those if you're fighting. You can't replicate the kata. You don't have the kata category.
Yeah, and what the Tengu are known for in samurai fiction is teaching of
swordsmen.
Yeah, the kata that are available all seem to be the ones that replicate them being a bird person. They don't seem to have this is just, striker's air or whatever. So yeah, according to this, they can't
and they
imitate
can't even
kata.
replicate them.
No.
And they can't even replicate them, so to do them right. So basically, if you are a Tengu, the best use of your ability, your best use, is fighting Shugenja.
Or monks.
Because, well,
monks
you're not going to
okay.
end up fighting many monks. There are not very many of them.
No.
And a monk will use one kiho. And
generally, yeah.
When you're playing a monk, generally, you do a kiho. You just do that one for the fight because it takes a round to set up a new kiho. And there are lots of kiho, and this book adds a bunch more, but there's not as many kiho as there are invocations.
No. There's
a good chance that you are going to be the one with all the kiho anyway. So you'd want to use your kiho instead of kiho.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
And probably you'll have started the fight putting down a kiho, and you're not wanting to change it. But invocations, you definitely want to learn. That's a new. I don't know that one. Okay, I want to be able to do that. That sounds cool. That's They really seem to be geared more towards Shugenja.
This is the magic slapback fight. You throw a fireball at me, I'm going to throw that fireball back at you, or anything like that. I'm going to turn your magic and do it back at you. That's where these come in. And I don't think you can check for me. I don't have my book open. I don't think you necessarily have to be an enemy.
No. You study someone else's technique. So, yeah.
Right. So here's where you do it. You put one of these guys in a party with a blasty Shugenja, and they're copying the Shugenja's invocations. And now instead of one blast of air, you've got two blasts of air or whatever. You're doubling your firepower from your Shugenja. And that's how you use this one. If you're trying to use this fighting an enemy, it's going to be really hard and somewhat annoying.
Yeah. Now, it must be said, their rank 6 ability is choose one technique category your school does not already have available to you. That technique type is now available to you.
And then you get your kata.
That's when you get your kata. So maybe all the famous famous Tengu who taught Kakita how to fight, or this other person how to make swords or whatever. Maybe those are all rank 6 ones, and that's how they get that good. It does seem a little odd, though.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad. It's different. As I said, I think it would be very annoying to play if you're thinking you're copying your opponent's techniques rather than your allies. If you're copying your allies' techniques in your party, then I think it's very solid. If you but not at low levels. You have to get that meditation up there high. But that said, it just doesn't duplicate the classic Tengu trope of the Tengu Swordsmaster. So you can't make that yourself.
Not until you get to rank 6, maybe. But that's how many people get that far. But yeah, I think that's quite a thing.
And there is a polearm kata in the curriculum. And so this is used to show off their new kata, which are primarily polearm. So this is one you want to be wandering around with your staff or your spear or something as your weapon to use.
So that's the Tengu. The next one is another Yobanjan school. This is the Woolen Hooves Trapper tradition. So these are the folks who live up in the north and get on reasonably well with the unicorn. They may once have been the same people who became the Utaku battle maidens. They have woolly ponies, which look adorable, I have to say. They are an artisan / bushi, so they get kata rituals and shuji, which is, I think, almost that's a really classic combo, isn't it?
That's the standard.
That's the standard.
Memorized.
Yeah. Their school ability is I can quibble about this one all day. When you make a check to employ an unconventional solution, subject to GM's discretion, reduce the target number of that check by your school rank. So that's GM fiat, the technique, I think. Like, what defines unconventional? If you do the same thing several times, is that now conventional for you?
You've done it before.
Is this unconventional for Rokigani standards? Is this unconventional for Woolly Hooves Trapper standards? I think there's going to have to be some negotiation going on with that one.
My GM would hate me doing it with this school technique because I am always like inventing stuff, making him wonder what on earth I am doing. And if I had actual incentive to make it different every time.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, I would definitely get in trouble with this technique.
Yeah.
Either that's really good for you if you're a really creative person or really bad for your GM. So,
yeah.
Something to think about.
They're starting out, amusingly, despite the fact that the Woolen Hooves people, and they start out with a horse bow, they don't start out with a horse, which is, and the art has a horse on it. So it's kind of like, well, you don't get a horse. So I'm curious about that one. Yeah. We don't even get a goat, but you do get a horse bow. How handy. The rank 6 ability, I'm not too sure about. Once a scene when you would suffer an amount of damage which would cause you to exceed your endurance threshold, you may instead suffer that amount of strife instead. Is that a good rank 6 ability, do you think?
That feels like the original Moto school. It's not a super rank 6 ability. It's somewhat on the lower end of rank 6 abilities, I would say. It would be neat to have as an earlier ability.
Yeah. It's kind of like
rank 6.
I would be incapacitated by that, but instead I'm just very upset.
But anyway. So those are the schools. I don't have too much opinion on that other than
what already said. Which, I mean, this is us.
Been very opinionated.
This is absolutely us being just theory crafting. This is what it sounds like. It may play very differently once you get into it. So I think we have to kind of you have to take that in mind when you think about what we've said. So there.
Yep. So okay, then there are some new. Distinctions of different kinds. New distinctions. There's Knowledgeable Wilderness Guide. Okay. There is Thoughtful Arbiter. And then the one that was interesting to me was there is Skilled Midwife. We have done discussions, I believe, on here about midwifing, However, there has never been anywhere in any of the books, including this one, any discussion of actual midwifing in Rokugan. So we've talked about it in terms of Japan. I've got information on the Winter Garden about it, but there's not any there. So it was interesting to see this pop up in the middle of nowhere. And I admit I cannot imagine very many people choosing that distinction because I don't know how often that comes up. It would have to be a very unique game to ever be able to use that distinction.
Yeah, I mean, bearing in mind, there's slightly wider application. There's an example that they give, when performing a check for when your midwife skills are a benefit, and it's such as a culture fire check to theorize why a particular village is experiencing a rash of illness in their youth, in their kids, or that kind of thing. And in fact, even a fitness check to act quickly enough to save a child, because as we know, midwives have better child saving reflexes. You can reroll 2 dice. So it is a little broader than just it sounds a little limiting, but they kind of broaden out. So it's anything to do with pregnancy, childbirth, childhood illnesses, and child rearing, and things like that. So it is a little bit broader than it might seem at first glance. But I actually like that it's an addition. It immediately makes you start thinking, oh, maybe that's something I should think about putting into my game. That's an aspect that does exist and that's real and something we should think about.
It was just interesting. They haven't, how little in general all the Splat books have about child rearing, period.
Yeah.
Has always been a kind of a little bit annoyance to me, I guess. Annoyance isn't quite the right word. It's just, there's so little to go on that player characters very rarely can even grok how they were raised because there's just not much material about any of that. So, but no, it's fun to be creative and think of creative ties in. So there's absolutely that.
Yep. So there's a couple of new passions which are nice enough. There's charity and kintsugi, which is a nice little cultural detail. So I think it's nice to have it as a particular passion.
Charity is very easy to use.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get your strife down by charity all the time. So that's a nice one for that. Kintsugi is very hard to use unless you're really creative. So
well, I mean, like with all passions, it's not just can you do it, but can you interact with? But yeah, you have to make a check in some way. So you've kind of got to, well, I need to talk about my favorite topic with this person, make a roll, get some strife back.
There's new adversities.
Yep.
Insomniac. Which is what you think it is. Out of shape. This is a good one for both out of shape and just minor illness.
Yeah.
So I like that. You could do that as out of shape, or stalked by a creature.
Yes.
I thought all of these were good adversities. I thought that they absolutely had application and adventure. Especially if you take stalked as creature to go into the supernatural world, all kinds of supernatural creatures or yokai or stuff. That's a different take on haunted.
Yeah.
Haunted, where they're talking in your head. Well, stalked by creatures is they're not talking in your head. They're really just out to get you,
Yeah.
When you know it.
Yeah.
So very applicable.
Yeah, I do like it. It's like you believe a creature of some kind is stalking you, whether or not this is true, which I think is hilarious.
Yes.
Anxieties, you've got a fear of common creatures. So these are people who are scared of fairly generally what other people would consider to be non-dangerous. So cats, dogs, that sort of
Spiders.
thing. Yeah, that kind of thing. So it's the standard anxiety thing. So
spider.
Here you go. Have some strife and avoid point every so often. I like fear of mediocrity. Actually, I think that can drive some interesting character development. So people, you can end up acting in silly ways because there are people who are afraid of mediocrity and they end up really trying too hard, which actually ends up causing more problems. Fear of poison, which I honestly think is only a disadvantage outside of Scorpion Lands. In Scorpion Lands, it's perfectly reasonable. Yeah. So that's us for new disadvantages and advantages, indeed. There's a new heritage table. If you need a new heritage table. So
for dragons to dragonfly. Yeah.
Yep. There are a few new ones like at one with nature and ties to the perfect land, which is going to depend on whether or not you've run Imperfect Land, the adventure yet. Medical innovator, Gaijin consorts, revered parent, or path to enlightenment. There you go. So that's stuff your ancestors may have gotten up to. So all new things.
Okay. And then there's a bunch of new techniques. And we're not going to talk about all of them because there's way too many. And, Lord knows we talk long enough as is. However, we did want to talk about some. Among the Kehoe, there's 16 new Kehoe. Now, Kehoe needed padding out. So all good. However, I did want to highlight something that's been a problem to me for all the Kehoe.
Right.
In general, but then it's continued, it's made stronger here, which is that fire Kehoe are just the best.
Right.
They're just really strong. And so one of the weaknesses in general of fire stance is it's not a very defensive stance.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a aggressive stance, and you open yourself up to harm, to do it.
Yeah.
By taking strife and other things. I mean, it's just fire in general is aggressive. The existing Kehoe fire are some of the strongest aggressive Kehoe. Bonus successes are awesome anyway. Fire Kehoe means those bonus successes start going into burst effects, and now you're really getting strong. And then what the new techniques do, the new Kehoe do that's a little, I don't want to say problematic, but more of a good thing. They're strong. Their fire Kehoe in this book are also very strong, but surprisingly defensive.
Yes.
So you can take your fire-focused monk or whoever's doing these fire-focused Kehoe, and now they can cover up all their vulnerabilities as well because they've got these really defensive fire Kehoe. So if the battle starts turning against them, they still only need their one ring. They're still in fire stance.
Just looking at this one example, just kind of the first one, Blistering Retribution. While your key is active, after you defend against damage dealt by a character in this scene, you decrease the target number of your next attack or scheme action targeting that character by half the amount of fatigue you received, which is quite a lot.
Yeah.
That means getting hit is good for you. Initially, you're still taking the damage, but suddenly you can be much better at hitting the person in front of you, and so getting hit is suddenly a good thing instead of it being a downside of being in fire. It's good and fine. The Volcanic Fist increases the target number to resist checks of you. Oh no, that's not really the same thing. Yeah, so one like I say, one of the issues is if you're in fire, it should be high risk, high reward. But if you're also able to defend and get bonuses for being hit and stuff, does that make these too good?
And I'm not going to say, I'm not qualified to say whether these are too good or not. I find in general that the fire Kehoe are stronger than any other way to do these from what I've seen. The other ones might just be more tricky and I'm not grokking them fully. But that's okay. I mean, a non-fire one is the Eternal Mind's Gate, where you start seeing glimpses of your past lives. The Trace of Life's Past ritual, which is also in the rituals section, sees more of your past lives. So these are the ways that your Togashi are seeing their past lives becoming Togashi. So I thought those were pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about all 16.
No, but that is 16 new Kiho, which is actually quite a lot of extra ones. So that's kind of cool. The new kata, I think one of the interesting things about them is the ones they're the usual general ones, which could be just Bushi Monk and general close quarter kata, but there are a bunch of ones that are specific to the different types of yokai, or the different types of non-human that you can be, the non-human kata category. And there's a fair few in there, which is an interesting way of simulating the abilities of a non-human.
One thing that's different about the kata in this book than most is that they are exclusive to Bushi or Monk. Most of them.
That's a good point, actually, yeah.
Which means the courtier fighter, the pure courtier fighter, or different classes, people who have been who have access to kata but are not actually Bushi tagged, don't get them. And so that is one of the weaknesses of Bushi. I don't know. There hasn't been a whole lot that's been Bushi specific. So these kata are. So, well, my little courtier might be, some of these I wish I could use. They're good, and it's good to have things that are Bushi on. I'm all for.
Yeah.
It's tricky kata to be worth noting. The bear swipe kata makes a condition last until the end of your next turn. It is an Earth 2 opportunity thing and makes the condition luster. And it supposedly works for all conditions. So prone or immobilized or anything.
Bleeding, dazed, disoriented, and prone. Those are your choices.
Okay. However, it only works off of Earth opportunities. Earth stance techniques that generate conditions only make prone.
Yeah.
You could use this if you were doing an earth water one, something that lasts a bit longer, like.
Correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.